I'm 36 years old, and for most of my adult life, I've been known as that guy who married up. My name's Nate, and for the past 10 years, my wife's family never let me forget it. To be clear, I didn't come from money. I grew up in a small town, raised by a single mom who worked two jobs and still found time to bring me sandwiches on her lunch break. College wasn't an option right out of high school, so I joined the military, served 4 years, and then worked construction, side hustled in IT, and eventually started a small software business out of a garage apartment I rented behind a bowling alley. So no, I wasn't born with a silver spoon in my mouth. But I've always worked. When I met Emily, my wife, we were both 26. She was finishing her MBA, and I was just starting to land mid-sized contracts with small businesses for a little inventory app one coded in my spare time. She never seemed to care about money. She liked that I read before bed, that I cooked my own meals, that I walked dogs on weekends to make extra cash. I thought that was enough. I thought her family would see what she saw. But from the first handshake with her father, I knew exactly where I stood. I remember the first dinner I had with them, some high-end steakhouse downtown. Her dad ordered for me without asking, told the waiter, he'll take the sirloin, medium. It's the safest bet. Her mom smiled politely, barely made eye contact. And her uncle Mark, the one who always wore cufflinks that probably cost more than my car, just smirked and said, "So what charity helped you crawl your way up to Emily?" That was the first time I heard it, charity case. It wouldn't be the last. Over the years, it became their family joke. At holidays, her cousins would hand me empty envelopes and say, "Oops, we forgot you're the one who gets gifts, not gives them." Her aunt once asked if I'd like to borrow her husband's tux for our anniversary dinner, so you won't look like the valet. They always laughed like it was harmless, but each little jab chipped away at something inside me. Emily would roll her eyes and say, "Ignore them. They're snobs." But she never said it to them. She never told them to stop. Still, I loved her. So I bit my tongue. I smiled through dinners, toasted champagne at their lake house, and played nice at every charity gala they invited me to as their plus one. I stayed out of the way and kept building my business quietly and steadily through long nights and silent weekends. Then came the pandemic, and everything changed. I won't bore you with the details, but my app pivoted fast. Inventory management became essential when supply chains collapsed. Small businesses needed exactly what I'd been refining for 5 years. Contracts exploded. A logistics firm bought a 40% stake. Suddenly, I wasn't just doing well. I was in the features in Forbes bracket. And for the first time in my life, the calls I got weren't people asking for favors. They were offering deals. You'd think that would change something. That maybe Emily's family would finally treat me like more than some lucky stray she'd adopted. Nope. Instead, the tone shifted from mockery to something worse, entitlement. I noticed it first with Uncle Mark. He cornered me at Thanksgiving, asked if I'd be interested in a friendly investment into his boutique real estate firm. I declined politely. 2 weeks later, he sent me a formal proposal with a six-figure minimum and a preferred family return rate. I ignored it. Her father invited me to lunch, just us. That had never happened before. He handed me a manila folder mid-meal and said, "This is a joint venture opportunity. Family exclusive. No banks. Just blood." I stared at the numbers and said I'd think about it. I never got back to him. And then came Christmas. They rented out a luxury cabin in Aspen. I wasn't invited. Emily was. She went. "It's just easier," she told me. "They'll behave better if it's just me." That stung more than anything they'd ever said. While she was gone, I reviewed our finances. The prenup we signed 10 years ago was solid, airtight, really. Emily had insisted on it at the time. Her dad's lawyer had drafted it, not mine. I didn't even blink back then. Of course I'd signed it. I had nothing to lose. No? That document was the only thing standing between my life and their claws. I started noticing strange things after that. Emily became distant, not cold, but different, asking more about my assets, wondering if we should consider combining accounts for tax purposes. Her lawyer friend Lisa invited us to brunch one weekend and casually asked if we'd ever considered updating our marital agreement, now that things had shifted. Shifted. That word echoed in my head. Then came the dinner. Emily asked if I'd be open to having her family over, just a small gathering. She said they wanted to make peace, to reconnect. I didn't buy it, but I agreed. I hosted, hired a private chef, set the long dining table, put my best wine on the counter. I even put out fresh flowers. They all arrived, dressed to the nines. Her dad handed me a bottle of champagne I recognized from Costco. Her uncle brought a briefcase. Emily looked anxious. We sat. We toasted. Small talk flowed like syrup, slow and forced. Then Uncle Mark cleared his throat and pulled the briefcase onto the table. Well, he said, adjusting his cuffs. There's something we'd like to discuss tonight. Something overdue. Her dad nodded. We know things have evolved. And we all think it's time we revisit some of the old paperwork. What's past is past, but let's talk future. Then Mark opened the briefcase and slid out a manila folder. I looked at Emily. She stared down at her lap. Inside the folder, a proposed amendment to our prenup, a dissolution clause, a redistribution agreement. In short, they wanted me to void it. Her mom chimed in. Your family, Nate. Truly. And family protects each other. But it's not right that everything stays so separate. Then Uncle Mark smiled like a snake and said, You've done well. Let's be honest, we all underestimated you. But this is a chance to show your gratitude, to prove you belong. I sat there, my heart thudding behind my ribs, watching their smug faces, watching Emily say nothing. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't push the folder back. Instead, I reached under the table, unzipped my leather bag, and laid a single envelope on the polished wood. Everyone stopped talking. Even the chef froze in the doorway. That envelope had one item inside. I looked at Uncle Mark and said, You brought a lawyer. That's smart, because what I'm about to say is going to need one. And that's when I opened the envelope. Inside the envelope was a certified copy of the original prenup, complete with notarized signatures, timestamps, and, most importantly, a clause most of them had either forgotten or never read. I slid it across the table toward Mark and tapped a paragraph I had highlighted. Clause 7.5, I said, calmly. In the event of an attempted renegotiation of this agreement by any third party, including but not limited to immediate or extended family, the signer reserves the right to impose a legal freeze on all shared marital assets pending a full investigation into coercion. Mark blinked. Emily's father reached for the paper with shaking hands. And since we're speaking openly tonight, I continued, locking eyes with Emily, I've already hired my own legal team. You remember Tony Hargrove, right? The guy you all said would never return a nobody's call? He's representing me now. He reviewed this clause last week. His advice? Document everything. The silence was thick. I stood slowly, walked to the bar cart, and poured myself a drink with a steady hand. I also have emails. From your dad. From Lisa. From you, I said, looking directly at Emily now. Her eyes widened. Asking for asset consolidation. Suggesting account mergers. Casual suggestions, just innocent enough. But when you put them in order, they paint a picture. Emily finally spoke. Nate, it wasn't like that. I nodded slowly. Then why didn't you tell me they were planning this? Why didn't you say anything when he opened the briefcase? Her mom cleared her throat, trying to salvage the moment. This doesn't have to be hostile. We're just talking. No, I said, you're not. You're cornering. I turned to Uncle Mark. I also know about your debt, $180,000 in back taxes, another $90,000 owed to vendors. Your boutique firm is circling the drain, and this little family reunion? This wasn't a dinner. This was a financial intervention. You're bleeding, and I was your band-aid. He bristled. You have no right. I raised my hand. You came into my home. You brought a lawyer. You handed me legal documents across my dinner table. You made it my right. Then I looked around the table, letting the silence stretch. For 10 years, I smiled through every insult. I laughed when you called me a charity case. I drove your drunk nephew home at midnight. I paid for the generator when the lake house lost power. I answered every favor with a yes. And I did it because I thought that's what family does. But I get it now. You never saw me as family. You saw me as an ATM with a heartbeat. Emily finally looked up. Nate, please, can we talk in private? I smiled, but there was no warmth behind it. We'll talk, but not here. Then I turned to the chef, who was still frozen in the doorway. Dinner's over. Please box everything to go. The guests, if you could still call them that, sat in stunned silence. Her mom opened her mouth to speak, but nothing came out. Her dad was pale. Mark's face had turned a shade of crimson I didn't know was humanly possible. As I gathered my things, I added one last thing quietly, without anger, just certainty. I didn't get rich by being stupid. And I didn't stay quiet because I was weak. I stayed quiet because I believed you were worth the benefit of the doubt. But tonight, I finally ran out of benefit. And with that, I walked upstairs, leaving them with their paperwork, their boxed dinners, and a silence that had the weight of a closing vault. Emily didn't follow me. Not immediately. She sat there with them for a while. I could hear hushed voices through the vents. I didn't bother listening. I already knew how the night would end. But I wasn't done yet. Not even close. Because I still had one card left to play. About 20 minutes passed before I heard the soft knock on the bedroom door. Nate. Emily's voice was low. Not the usual calm, confident tone I knew. This was hesitant. Careful. I didn't answer right away. I let the silence do the work. When I finally opened the door, I didn't invite her in. I just stepped aside. She walked in slowly, glancing around like she wasn't sure if she belonged in her own house. Or maybe she was just seeing it differently now. This wasn't the place we'd built together anymore. It was the fortress she'd tried to breach, thinking I wouldn't notice. I sat down in the armchair near the window. She stayed standing. I didn't know they were going to do that, she said finally. The briefcase, the documents, that wasn't part of what we talked about. I asked, not angrily, just to see how she'd respond. She shifted. I mean me and my dad. He's been worried about. About what? I cut in. About losing access? About me keeping what I earned instead of handing it over like some grateful servant. She blinked hard, like I'd slapped her. It wasn't like that. No. I leaned forward. Because it sure felt like an ambush, Emily. You sat there while they tried to rewrite the agreement your own lawyer drafted. You didn't speak up. You didn't even flinch. I was trying to keep the peace. I laughed, but it was hollow. There's no peace in a hostage negotiation. Her face twisted, defensive now. You think I planned all this? That I want your money? I said slowly. You didn't think I'd ever stand up to you. That landed. I saw it in the way she went quiet, the way her shoulders sank. For a long time, neither of us spoke. When she finally did, it wasn't what I expected. Do you remember our second anniversary? She asked, softly. I nodded. The weekend in Charleston. You gave me that little wooden box with a note inside. Whatever we build, it's ours. Always ours. I still have it. I said nothing. That's who I married, she whispered. Not this version of you who treats everything like it's war. That stung more than it should have. Because the truth was, she wasn't entirely wrong. I had changed. I was different now. But it wasn't about the money. It was about the lies. You want the truth? I asked. She nodded, eyes glassy. I still love you, I said. But I don't trust you. Not after tonight. She looked down, like the floor might offer an escape. Then what happens now? I didn't answer. Because I didn't know. Not yet. What I did know was that her family was still downstairs, probably figuring out whether to spin this into a misunderstanding or retreat into silence, and hope the tension passed like a storm. But I had no intention of letting them reset the narrative. I'd spent a decade as their punchline. Tonight was just the beginning. And that's where the final piece came in. Before the dinner, I had scheduled something for the next morning. A quiet move, but a powerful one. Across town, in a sleek glass building downtown, a legal team was preparing a revised trust. One that would shift the entirety of my company's holdings and all personal assets into an irrevocable trust with two trustees, myself and an old friend they didn't even know existed. It was scheduled to go live at 10 a.m. And once it did, no one could touch what I'd built. Not Emily. Not her father. Not Mark and his sinking real estate circus. They could scream, threaten, guilt trip, all they wanted. It wouldn't matter. I had played the fool long enough. And now? Now I was ready to show them what a real plan looked like. Emily stayed in the room that night, but I didn't sleep beside her. I lay awake in the armchair, staring out the window as snow began to fall over the city. It was quiet, almost peaceful, but inside, I was somewhere between tired and alert, like the aftermath of a long storm where you're still expecting another wave to hit, even when you know the sky has already broken open. At 7:15 the next morning, I dressed, brewed a pot of coffee, and headed out before she could say much. I left her a note on the counter. It said, "We'll talk tonight. After I'm done." That was all. I didn't owe anyone long explanations anymore, not her, not her family. Downtown was silent at that hour. My attorney, Tom, a friend from my early tech days who'd gone into estate law, was already waiting with a binder on the table and 2 copies of the final documents. "Still want to go through with it?" he asked. "Yes." Even with her name left out completely? No contingencies? None. He paused. "You sure about the no revisions clause?" "This is final." You'd need both trustees to dissolve it. Not even you could override it alone. That's the point. Tom nodded and slid the papers across. I signed them. 1, 2, 3 signatures, then a firm press on the notary stamp. And just like that, everything changed. Every account I held, every equity share, every future dividend and acquisition, all of it now belonged to the structure we'd created, the Holt Trust. It couldn't be contested. It couldn't be amended without unanimous approval from both trustees, me and James McAdams, my former coding partner who'd walked away from the startup scene to become a Buddhist monk in Oregon. I'd called him 3 weeks ago, told him everything. He didn't ask for details. He just said, "You finally ready to stop bleeding for people who never brought you a Band-Aid? And then, I'll do it. But if they come crying, I'm not answering the door." Perfect. By noon, the trust had triggered its automatic redirection protocols. Shared accounts were split. Old credit cards were frozen and replaced. My will was rewritten and notarized. Emily had no idea yet, but she would by sunset. I drove home slowly. No music, just the hum of the engine. My phone vibrated once, Emily. I didn't answer. When I walked into the house, I could feel the tension like static in the air. She was pacing the kitchen, phone in hand, her face tight and pale. "They're freaking out," she said before I could speak. "My dad says you filed something. That there's a trust? That he's not authorized anymore on the tax planning docs." I nodded. "Correct. You did all that without telling me? Just like you sat at that table and watched them slide legal documents across the table toward me." "That wasn't me." "Stop," I said, holding up a hand. "Let's not insult each other." She stared at me, and for the first time in years, I saw the person I'd once fallen in love with begin to flicker behind her eyes. Not the polished woman who charmed rooms full of strangers. The one who used to laugh with her feet in a river, eating gas station snacks and talking about books she'd loved as a kid. But it flickered, and then it was gone. "Did you ever love me?" she asked, her voice smaller than I'd ever heard it. I took a long breath. "I still do. But I don't love the version of us that's become your family's project. They don't speak for me." "No," I said, gently. "But you let them." She sat down at the kitchen table, staring at the marble, tracing the veins in the stone with her finger like she was trying to follow a road that might lead somewhere else. "You didn't even give me a chance to fight for us." "I gave you 10 years," I said quietly. 10 years of holding my tongue, being their punching bag, funding their weekends, laughing off their cruelty while you told me it was just how they were. She looked up. "So what now? Are we done?" I didn't answer right away. Instead, I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out a second envelope, this one smaller. Inside was a printed email chain between me and a therapist, one I'd contacted months ago, before the trust, before the lawyer, when things still felt salvageable. The subject line was Marital Counseling Referral Inquiry. "I tried," I said, sliding it across the table. "I asked you to go. You said we didn't need it. I didn't know how bad it had gotten, because you didn't want to know." She opened the envelope. "Read a few lines." Then her hands trembled, just a bit. "I'm not trying to destroy you, Emily," I said. "This isn't revenge. This is protection. For me." She nodded, swallowing hard. "So what happens next?" I paused, then said it as simply as I could. "You'll stay here until the end of the month. I'll cover everything. After that, I'll move forward with a separation agreement. No claims, no counters. You'll have what you came into the marriage with, and nothing less. And if I don't agree, you signed the prenup. You helped write it. And now, even if you wanted to fight it, you'd be going up against a trust you legally can't touch." There was a long pause. She finally whispered, "They told me it wouldn't hold up." I nodded. "They were wrong. And if you'd asked me directly, I would have told you that." Her face crumpled. But I didn't go to her. I didn't reach out or soften my voice. I had nothing left to give her, not the kind she'd taken for granted. That night, I packed a bag and left. Not because I was angry. Because I was done. I booked a room in a quiet hotel by the bay, overlooking the water. I turned my phone off. Ordered a glass of wine. Slept deeper than I had in years. A week passed. Then 2. Emily's lawyer reached out. Confirmed she would sign the separation papers. No contest. No claims. She declined any alimony. Said in her note that she wanted to keep what was left of her dignity. I respected that. When the final documents came through, I signed them without a second thought. I kept the house, the assets, the company. But more than that, I kept my peace. A month later, I moved out of the city. Not far, just enough. I bought a small place with tall windows and a garden that got the right kind of sunlight. Hired a golden retriever from a rescue shelter who thinks socks are chew toys and that every knock at the door means someone came just for him. I wake up early now. I cook again. I read at night. And sometimes, when I think back on the past 10 years, I don't feel bitterness. I feel clarity. Because sometimes the worst kind of poverty isn't financial, it's emotional. It's spending years being told you're only valuable for what you give, not who you are. And walking away from that? That's the richest thing I've ever done.